So this weekend, I have been outside. Okay, so I did my
I've seen
usual.
this.
Yes, I did my usual dancing Friday night. I had to go to Ocho's to get my little Latin dancing in. And then on Saturday, there's this, it was a first ever event for this group called Art of Us Boise. They put on at the Global Lounge, which is, anyway, they put it on this place called the Global Lounge. And it was just this really cool, like, event where you had different vendors that came and set up their, like, goods that they had. There was, like, jewelry, there were tattoos, there was clothing. There were all of these different vendors. And then in
Yeah.
the latter half of the evening, they had a DJ. Well, they had a DJ the whole time, but the second DJ was, like, intended to make it like a dance party, right? So I went with my friends. We had a really good time. Like, I really worked on my outfit and I thought it was super cute. And
It was. I
then,
saw it.
thank you. And then on Sunday, there's this different group called Love R&B. So this is like, or called Love More R&B. And this is, I don't know, nationwide. They travel, they go places, they do things, da da da. And so basically, they just have an R&B party night. And let me tell you, I
Mhm.
have not seen this many Black people in Boise in one place until last night. We
Oh,
had
wow. I love that.
the best time.
I
The best
love
time.
that.
So we were
Look, they come to
dancing and
St.
we were
Louis.
singing and we were like line dancing and two-stepping and like swaying, and like they also gave everybody these blow up little microphones when you when you came in. And so it was it was just, it was truly the best. Like, I was living my best life last night,
I love that.
and it started at 5 o'clock and it was over
Oh,
by 9. So on a school night, everybody was in bed by 10. Actually, I think they decided to extend it until 11:30, but I couldn't do it. I think I left at like 9:30, 9:45. I'm like, girl's tired, you know?
that's
But
okay.
it was so good. It was so
I love
good.
that. I love that. Are you
Mhm.
feeling more outsidey? Are you becoming an outsidey type?
I've always been outside, but I've been doing other things.
That's
Like,
true.
we haven't
That is
had
true.
events like these before, like the Culture in Motion
Hmm.
event and then having the R&B event. Like, that's not normal for Boise. Like,
Hmm.
you go to big cities, they literally doing that every weekend, right? You just like pick
Right.
a spot and go. But for us, like, this was a
Right.
really big deal. And so the turnout for both events were really good. The like vibe was really good everywhere. The people were awesome. Like, it was so beautiful. And it was just one of those spaces where you could just like be and do whatever you're doing and you're good. Like, you're in a safe space. Mm. It was so fun.
I love that so much. I love
Yeah.
that so much. There's an event that's here in St. Louis that just got started up, called Strawberry Bounce, and it's specifically for sapphic Black women. So I'm like, I don't want to go there and stink up the joint, but it looks really fun. It
Yeah.
looks really fun. So when they make the co-ed version, it's
The
amazing
co-ed
people.
version.
I get it. I totally get it. And I
Yeah.
think that that event comes to St. Louis. I'm pretty sure. So maybe Unc will step out. I
You
don't
gotta
know.
step out. Yeah.
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 Well, cool. That's fun.
Yeah. Tell me about your trip across the South.
Yeah, I don't think that we've talked about that yet. But uh my husband has, spring break, and so I decided to u utilize that time so we could get a road trip in. It had been a long time since we've gone on the road, and we travel really well together, and so it's like I just but then also I was interested in going and maybe kind of following the civil rights trail. I don't know if you've heard about the tourism effort that's been happening to have people travel across the South, see certain landmarks, see certain museums, which is my thing. I love a
Mhm.
museum. But we did a 9 day trip in the car. We went from St. Louis to Memphis. We went to Birmingham. We stopped in Selma, and then we stayed in Montgomery. Then we went down to Atlanta for 2 days, and then we did 2 days in Asheville, North Carolina. Not a part of the trail, but we have family there.
Mm.
And then we went up to Lexington, Kentucky, and then we went to Louisville, Kentucky, and then back home. So
Wow.
it was a great trip.
Yeah.
There were so many things in there, obviously civil rights being one of the main ones. And the whole reason that I had thought about this idea and really wanted to go was our neighbors went on this trip together, and they're like an older white couple. They're very with it. They actually go translate at the border for people that are wanting to immigrate
Oh,
to
wow.
America. Like they're a really cool couple. And so they told me about their trip that they took, and I was like, oh, well, I'm into most of that stuff, so let's go. And so we mixed in a little bit of music and art in the mix and some family too, but it was
Yeah.
really, really restorative and really beautiful.
I love that. Yeah.
Memphis is a town that feels like very St. Louis-y in the sense that it's a neighborhoods, it's culture and community. Everyone's saying hello to you as you go down the street kind of vibe. It was really nice and homey. Birmingham is that was an incredible experience. While I'm not the biggest fan of the town, just because it's not my speed, the Civil Rights Museum there is the best that we've been to. Um, they also have their museum right across the street from the 16th Street Baptist Church, and so
Mm,
we got to take that tour. Now, that's not a historian's tour, that's the church's tour, so it's a
sure.
little bit, Lord and Savior Jesus Christy, but whatever. It's the church, and it is a crazy story and a crazy experience standing where things were happening.
Yeah.
Um, we we stopped in Selma to check out the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that was interesting. Selma is Selma is a rural country town. It seems a little bit to me um, not invested in enough. I
Mm,
just don't see a lot of investment there. I
yeah.
was like, "Ooh, this is a historic spot." I just don't know if the population's there or not, or the industry rather.
Right.
But it was still, I was still really happy that we went. Montgomery, that is where Rosa Parks is from. You have the Rosa Parks house. Also, the guy who wrote Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. Learn about his wife, maybe Anne Hathaway. Stay away from the script. It's about to go down. It's crazy, but we didn't get to see Rosa Parks' house, and I don't know if it's been developed or what, or we just typed in the wrong thing. But we just ended up at the project, so we were like, let's just go. Like, I don't think we're gonna find
Yeah.
it. Um,
That's
but
really
it
funny.
was also a Sunday, and Montgomery on Sunday is very southern, and everything is shut down. So
Yeah.
um, Atlanta was great. We got to see FKA Twigs perform, and that was the first time we saw her. And the crowd was amazing and black and queer and young and fun, and it was so cute. And then Asheville was a family trip, so we got to see a bunch of people that we know and love. And then same goes for Lexington and visiting friends. And then we went to Louisville, and Louisville was really charming, but really we just went there to sleep. So there's a
Mm,
lot in between. But the whole background to this trip meaning something to me actually is back in Memphis. When I was young, my family went to Memphis for a little vacation, and we went to that National Civil Rights Museum, and it really stuck with me. It's built alongside the Lorraine Hotel where MLK was shot and killed. And you see the room, and they stage it as if it were right after he had been murdered.
mm,
So I remember seeing that as a kid, and it lived with me. It lived with me since I saw it. And so I was nervous to go because I was like, oh, how's that gonna feel? Is it
yeah.
still so creepy? It had been so big and bad in my head that when we actually got there, I was like, okay, I'm actually taking in the placards. I'm actually just taking in the scenery. And I did also do this trip during spring break. So there were school groups, there were a bunch of kids. I was like, ah, dang it, I totally forgot about children.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
some of our trip was disturbed by that, but you know what? I was happy that they were there. I'm happy that their schools took them there.
Yeah.
I hope that they don't have nightmares about it like I did, but I was happy to kind of heal that part of my younger self and be like, it's not actually that scary. I mean, it's messed up,
Right.
but it's just it's super impactful. So
Hmm.
they're doing an amazing job there. But anyway, I'll ramble on and on. The Memphis Civil Rights Museum is amazing. Atlanta Civil Rights Museum is amazing, but Birmingham, that's the one. So if you get a chance to ever travel to the South, go to the Birmingham Civil Rights Museum. I think it's called the Civil Rights Institute, and
Hmm.
then go check out the 16th Street Baptist Church right across the street because, baby, you're standing in it. You are
Yeah.
standing in it. All the pictures of people being hosed down, but oh my God, you're just right there. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was something. It was really that was really impactful, and I'm happy that I got to have that experience. So that's the road trip. It was fun.
Yeah.
It was really good. It was a good use of time.
Well, I'm glad that you had a good time. I know when we were younger, we went to the Atlanta Civil Rights Museum with
Mhm.
my sister, dad, and my grandmother. I was maybe like 15 or so, something like that.
You know what's also crazy about the Atlanta Civil Rights Museum is
Mm.
that it shares the plot of land with the World of Coca-Cola and their
Oh,
aquarium. So it's like such different experiences for
yeah,
people, especially Black people standing in there.
right.
Um, and that was interesting. Yeah. We actually didn't get to go to that museum. I had gone before, I had seen it, and there were no new exhibits as far as I knew since I last saw it. We just went to the World of Coca-Cola because Michael had never been, and I was like, well, we've done everything. Let's go have some
Yeah.
fun. When I tell you we paid our money to go straight to the end of that thing because there were so many families and children there,
Oh,
it was
yeah.
like, you know what? You guys have so much fun. And the displays were also all tactile. Like, smell
Oh,
this,
fun. Yeah.
flick this, touch this. And no, like my husband's a germaphobe, and I'm kind of catching some of that a little bit. I'm like, what in the pre-COVID is going on? This is very licking ice cream to me.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
I need Coca-Cola to update their museum exhibits and interactions to something less disgusting.
Jeremy. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was still an amazing trip, and I'm glad that we did it. I'm glad that we
Hmm.
got to do it, to be honest.
That's awesome. I'm glad. I'm glad you had a good
Yeah,
time and came back
yeah.
restored, refreshed, ready for our
Slightly,
podcast. Yes.
slightly.
Yes. Slightly.
Well, do you want to get into our topic of the day?
Let's get into our topic of the day. The irony of immortality's non existence is that it does, in fact, exist, and it was discovered in the least likely of places, the cells of an African American woman named Henrietta Lacks, who lived in the early part of the 20th century. Henrietta Lacks died of cervical cancer in 1951 at the untimely age of 31. Surgeons at Johns Hopkins harvested cells from her tumor without her permission or the knowledge of her family. These cells became the basis of the first immortal human cell line, HeLa, for Henrietta Lacks. Variations of HeLa cells are used in research all over the world, resulting in more than 80,000 scientific publications, breakthrough research in cancer and health benefits, and enormous economic returns to biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries. Henrietta Lacks's immortal cells would change the face of medicine forever. However, the recognition of her involuntary donation to science would remain secret until the 1970s. This is the story of Henrietta Lacks.
Where do you want to start with Henrietta Lacks?
Let's start with who she was. It's kind of tough because it's not like she's one of like a rights activist where we get to follow her story from like inception of where she was born, who she was raised by. There we weren't really documenting her in that same way. But we have accounts from her family that just tell a little bit about who she was, but it's not a whole lot.
It's not a whole lot, but what we do have, I'm super interested in because I am using my 2026 brain to build who she is in my
Mhm.
mind. And a lot of times with these historical, the stories about the people that live in history, like I will make people black and white in my brain.
Yeah.
But then you have to fill them out with personality and color and like some of these people, these historical figures that we love so much, they snorted when they laughed and we just don't know that, you know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
building out the character helps a lot, and Miss Henrietta Lacks in my mind was a baddie. She
Mhm.
was kind of described as such. She was said to have hazel eyes, a tea tiny waist, size six shoes. She even changed her name, and they also said that she always wore red nails. I said, "Ooh, yes, that's my kind of girl." Like, bring
Yeah.
on the red nails, bring on the slim waist. She even named herself. I'm like, okay, you're powerful. If you could
Mhm.
have a 36-inch middle part bust down, you would, and you should. Like, she's giving. She is one of 10, which I mean, I guess wasn't that odd for someone who was
Mm-mm.
born in 1920
Right.
to have 9 siblings. But when she was 4 years old, when she was 4 years old, her mother gave birth to her 10th child. Can you imagine?
That's wild.
Can you imagine having a
As a mother,
4-year old and
literally
you're
no.
giving, oh, and I don't
Yeah.
know the ages as they spread out. It could have been actually spread out, but in my mind, she's 4. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
It's a lot. But unfortunately, her mother died due to complications during the birth, and that left her father with all the siblings, and he could not handle 10 children as like who could really? A
Right.
single father with 10 kids? That's crazy. So the kids were dispersed among family, and Henrietta went on to live with her grandma or her grandparents. And one thing about her story that is, I mean, slightly disturbing, but I guess also kind of regular, depending on where you were in America during this time, was that she ended up becoming roommates with her cousin, Day, who just, 12 years later was the father of her first child
Mm.
and ended up becoming her husband. So,
Yeah.
feelings, thoughts, context, letting it go. But
Yes.
also, like, it's interesting to me too that, like, this woman is so insulated by family throughout her entire story. Um, in a way that I feel like other figures like her would be more of an exhibit. She was
Mm.
really just with her family and just kind of living her life like normal. She just
Yeah.
didn't know that she was healing the world by existing, which is crazy. But, I think that's another reason why we don't have stories. She wasn't giving speeches or anything.
Right.
She only went to school up till 6th grade. She was a
Yeah.
tobacco farmer, and
Right.
tobacco needed to be farmed. So it's like she wasn't at a podium. She wasn't
Right.
becoming a politician,
People
wasn't
weren't
joining Jack
necessarily
and
like
Jill.
interviewing her to get her story or to like tell, more accounts than we we have right now, or there wasn't the
Right,
opportunity. Like nobody knew that she was going to be this like famous until postmortem basically. And even then it
right.
was over like 20 years until her family figured out what kind of legacy she was leaving without knowing it was even there.
Which is insane.
Right.
But yeah, I just wanted to point out like her early life is complicated, especially through our lens of today.
Mhm.
But also it seems as though she spent most of her time in community with her family, and that was a big deal.
Mhm.
Even after the loss of her mom, even after having to be separated from her siblings and things like that, it was always family.
Yeah.
And she and Day ended up having 5 children, which she went on to become a housewife and take care of them. And so it was always that. And I think that's really precious.
Yeah. And her family described her as being the matriarch of the family, which I thought was beautiful. Like I like to see the women empowerment even from those times, and I say even as if it wasn't, like, maybe even somewhat more normalized in a sense or in, like, different ways, maybe depending on your cultural views and things like that, but having, like, a strong woman head of household, it you're gonna hate this reference, but it reminds me of the character that Cicely Tyson plays in insert Madea film or insert
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, truly
Yeah.
that
No, but
matriarch, so
that's
that's kind of
real.
what I'm envisioning for her.
Yeah, I do hate the reference, so sorry. Is
Yes.
this who we are? But like, I also know that that is based on something so real. Like, I had a granny. Granny was the pillar of our family.
Yeah.
After Granny died,
Mhm.
family splinters. And that's just how it happens. I think, and my grandma, like Henrietta Lacks was born in 1920. My grandma was born in 1923. There's a
Mhm.
certain amount of sensibilities where I'm thinking about Henrietta Lacks and I'm like, I get it. Like my
Yeah.
grandma was funny. I'm sure at one point my grandma was a baddie. Should have been. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
young ladies becoming wives, becoming mothers, becoming heads of households, eventually heads of communities, you know?
Hmm.
That was kind of the expectation. And I don't know if everyone could step up to the plate, but when you hear people honor like Henrietta, honor her as a matriarch, I think that that is kind of a sign of, yo, this lady was really good to us, like really,
Yeah.
really good to us.
Yes, I agree. So in 1951, Henrietta goes to the doctor for basically these complications she's having. She's having vaginal bleeding and she's not really sure what's going on. And so essentially they end up diagnosing her with cervical cancer, which explains the symptoms that she was having. Who knows where that was onset from? Part of me wonders, like, okay, if you're working on a tobacco farm, is there any link there? I'm not a medical doctor, obviously, but I'd be curious just to know what she was maybe exposed to when she was at that tobacco farm. Anyhow, so
Hmm.
she went to the hospital, she had the vaginal bleeding, and the gynecologist diagnosed her with cervical cancer, seeing that she had a tumor, and they did a biopsy and everything. And so, unfortunately, Johns Hopkins was like one of the very few hospitals that would treat poor Black people. And so she had nowhere else to go. But as she's going through these radium treatments, for the cervical cancer, this was like really all that she could do to help get treatment, but also like her family couldn't really be there with her because of the radium. And so while they're doing these biopsies and they're trying to like test it and everything, Dr. George Gay, he's the gynecologist that was providing her service or that was on her care team, they decide to go ahead and take that sample, not just for the biopsy, but for their own testing and their own experiments. It turns out they actually did this for several of the patients that they had, like regardless of their race or socioeconomic status, et cetera. But the difference between Henrietta Lacks's cells and everybody else is that hers didn't die shortly after being, let's call it, harvested from her body. And that was what prompted them to continue to do research and to continue to do all of these experiments and ways of getting her cell to just keep replicating and create again those 80 over 80,000. 80, like that is an insane number. But 80,000 uh 80,000 publications due to her cells.
It's crazy. I mean, she is the basis of the polio vaccine, like,
Mhm.
vaccine, like what? And I understand the whole we need research, we need medical research, and at the time people didn't really have this concept of consent and
Right.
ownership. And the thing that gets me with that is, yeah, I'm saying that, but they sure had the idea to patent stuff. You know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
sure knew how to make sure that they would get some coin or definitely stop somebody else from getting coin. Very interesting, very odd, very uncomfortable. But I guess that's why Henrietta Lacks' story is so resonant with people. Like that is kind of crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of crazy that
Mhm.
this happened with no knowledge and people are just jumping for joy. Oh my God, we got this, we got this. And it's like that's from a person who actually
Yeah.
still needs your help.
Well, going back to even polio, the HeLa cells, they played an essential role in the development of the polio vaccine, but segregationists prevented African American children from benefiting from that vaccine, which her as a community activist and then also as a Black woman, like if she only knew,
Oh my
I can
God.
imagine the maybe fury she might have felt or disappointment that she might have felt to know that her cells weren't even helping her own people.
You know what? I do wonder if she could have been able to even advocate for herself. I mean, there are some quotes from her, or I guess quotes. We obviously don't know for sure, but the way that it's written is kind of in her vernacular. And keep in mind, she's from the South and only had a sixth grade education. So I can also see her being taken advantage of by fast talking, lawyered up,
Mm,
educated people
yeah.
where they can make it sound good and talk her out of, I don't know, do I want her to have made a ton of money? Kinda, just because they're black. But like, is that really what research is about? Is it more about saving the lives? You know what I mean? I don't, it's complicated. It's complicated.
It's supposed to be about saving lives, but they also see it as like a money ticket, especially when, I mean, to have so many publications from it, like clearly people knew that this was something special, right? So Henrietta Lacks' cells, they were like doubling over the time of like a 20 to 24-hour period, whereas other people's cells were dying. Like this was a huge deal at the time, but then also for the future of humanity. I mean, genuinely, she's been able to help people post-mortem all around the world. Like,
Yeah,
and doesn't even know it.
I know.
Like it's such a way to exploit someone and who's already been exploited, right?
Right.
Like it's really tragic when you think about it. They also use the HeLa cells to create the HPV vaccine, which is, I don't know if you call it ironic or coincidental, but had she had the HPV vaccine, that might have helped her not develop cervical cancer later in life. I say later in life, I mean, she was only 31, like very, very young. Very
I
young.
know that's
Yeah.
crazy.
So the way that the Lax's estate even found out about how her cells were being used is wild to me. So they're basically at dinner. They're meeting people, making friends, families coming together, and just out of the mention of Babette Lax's name, someone's like, "Oh, Lax, that's not really like a super common last name. Like, are you related to Henrietta Lacks?" And basically, come to find out, at this dinner is how the Lacks estate uncovers or is told that Henrietta Lacks' cells have been used for 25 years almost at this point for medical research with no notice, no compensation, no regard to their family or to their mother's legacy.
Can you even imagine?
No.
I guess it's a double again, it's holding both because on one hand, obviously I'd feel really taken advantage of and really
100%.
upset for my mom, you know.
Yeah.
I don't, upset is not the word. Like it would be devastating to know that like no one said anything, and you named it HeLa and never said, anything.
Yeah.
Okay. But on the other hand, it's like, whoa, like it's kind of like finding out that somebody that you know is a superhero or something like that.
Mhm.
It's like, wait, what you you're saving all these lives? It was just
Yeah.
you existing? That's wild. I think like one thing about her story, and I know that you're not done yet, but one thing about her story that disappoints me is that, when she ended up passing away, unmarked gravestone, all
Yeah.
these things, she ended up getting one, but that I mean, that one wasn't even until 2010 that had an actual epitaph on it that could honor her as who she is to the world. I
Mhm.
don't even know what feels right to like I don't know what feels right, like how you would honor that person. Because a part of me, obviously, again, back to the money thing, would I want her to just be some billionaire for genetic whatever? I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's right, but
Mm.
some sort of recognition,
Oh,
something,
100%. Yeah.
so care, some sort of care would be great, like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
hard
when
to
she
say
ended
too
up
because you
passing,
never know, like, what the path could have been. So she didn't have
exactly.
access to, like, a better hospital, but the hospital that they were able to go to took advantage of her, and unfortunately she passed away, but maybe had she been able to go to a different hospital, would she have gotten better treatment and survived? But then would they have had the audacity or same practices of taking people's cells to experiment on them and see what happened? And then it just like there's so many unknowns, right? And we're never gonna
Yeah.
know. But it's
Right.
hard to say what I don't wanna say which you would rather, but just like, I guess which route you take.
Yeah. What also gets me though about the Henrietta Lacks case is that it wasn't until the 90s when people started consenting or not consenting to their cells being used for
Yeah.
research, thanks to a Supreme Court case. It was Moore versus Regents of the University of California, and it was 1976 when everything started. And it was John Moore. He was treated for leukemia, and there was basically just a little sign sheet, saying, I consent to being tested, whatever, what have you, whatever. And he went home and was like, wait a minute, what do you mean consent to what
Mhm.
what would you be doing after you fix me? Like
Yeah.
what could possibly be happening? Which then obviously rolled on until it got to the Supreme Court and they ended up making sure that everybody had to consent. But like, why has that taken so long? Like bodily autonomy is so
Right.
last on the list. It seems it's crazy,
It's crazy, but it's also not shocking at this stage of the world, in this stage of our
honestly.
country, but yeah, it's really disappointing for sure. So in 2023, Lax's estate reached an undisclosed settlement with the biotechnology company Thermo Fisher Scientific Inc. And then most recently, they settled. Actually, this was just about a month ago because it was March 2026. Novartis
Mhm.
settled with the Lax estate. So there continues to be litigation for other pharmaceutical company the Lax estate are pursuing for the same reasons: the unapproved exploitation, use, and profiting of Henrietta's cells.
Mhm. Why is it that that I'm so for them I'm hoping winning the settlements. I hope it's something that's worthwhile and lasting for the rest of their family to live on off of this, like hello.
Hmm.
But why is it that I'm like, yes, 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 I want them to do it, but then if I go back to 1951 and think, what would happen if they told her that she, had this crazy, amazing um cell going on, and they gave her money, like part of me feels like if they did that, they'd be like, here's $2,000 and like call it
Yeah.
a day. You know what I mean?
It would have been
The
like a
other part
one
of
and
me,
done instead of like a perpetuity kind of thing. Or we don't even know if
oh
what
yes.
these settlements are, right? It's undisclosed, but if there's something in perpetuity, I think that that makes sense.
I would hope that it's in perpetuity,
Yeah.
seeing that the cell is in perpetuity and there are
Yeah.
people making patents using said cell in certain ways that are going to be the way that people's lives are saved. And it's all based on this stolen body. Like I did read something about her cell being involved in the first human animal hybrid situation. Did you read about
Mm-mm.
that? It was a
Mm-mm.
mouse and a HeLa cell that came together, and I can't remember, I didn't go very far,
Mm.
obviously, but it was called I want to say the human genome experiment, but let me double check that before I get up here lying. In 1965, Henry Harris and John Watkins created the first human animal hybrid fusing HeLa cells with mouse embryo cells. It
Oh,
enabled
wow.
advances in mapping genes to specific chromosomes, which would eventually lead to the Human Genome Project. The Human Genome Project is an international research project that I guess is still ongoing. Or I'm sorry, no, it ended in 2003. But it was a publicly funded um, project, we'll say project, that helps us understand DNA sequencing, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know
Mm.
about those animals though. I gotta, I don't know about this. I'm reading the little overview. Everybody calm down. But like, I think that there's a lot of, obviously there are rules in place because science can go too such thing as science going far. Um, I just don't know how I feel about knowing that the human genes that they're using for these experiments are from someone who lived and breathed and also was disenfranchised in so many ways.
Yeah.
And they're just like, ah, let's play with that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's like,
Yeah. Mm. Well, the remarkable science involved and the impact on the Lax's family, some of whom had chronic illnesses and no health insurance, were documented in a best-selling book by Rebecca Skloot, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, which was published in 2010. Oprah Winfrey portrayed her daughter in an HBO movie about the story.
Mhm. That did you see it when I watched it when it came out?
I didn't see the HBO movie.
Yeah, as an Oprah movie will be, you know, like
Yes.
it's not anyone else's fault. It's just Oprah movies are, but um that was how I learned about her. I think that's how a lot of people learned about Henrietta Lacks.
Mhm.
And I'm glad that they did it. I'm glad that the book came out. Unfortunately, we didn't learn anything until that was 2010 when the book was released. So
Yeah.
that's wild. Just reading about this, and reading about Henrietta Lacks and just kind of thinking about the fact that she wasn't aware of all the things that happened after her cells were stolen and used.
Yeah.
Um, it made me think, unfortunately, of Adriana Smith, from July of 2025. You definitely remember her. She was the woman who was in Georgia, who was
Oh,
brain dead in February and
yes.
gave birth in June.
Yes.
And oh, sorry, it's like chills. The fact and the reason that that happened, it wasn't for some experiment or anything like that. It was because nobody was sure what they could do legally because of the fight for women to no longer have a choice, apparently alive or dead.
Right.
I did hear tell that the kid is having a lot of developmental issues. Oh,
I wonder
you
why.
think?
Yeah.
Yeah, like so I don't know anything. I haven't followed up on the family. I hope that they're all doing well, but that story is just one of those that isn't going to go away and isn't going to become less frightening. And it reminds me of the Henrietta Lacks situation, like deeply.
That, and then we were also talking about the woman who had to go to a Zoom courtroom when she was giving birth. Her name is
Oh my
Sharice
God.
Doily. Mhm.
Oh my God. That was
Yes, I
crazy.
know, it was wild. So, this happened in 2024, September 2024. She's a pregnant mother of 3 from Jacksonville, Florida. She goes to the University of Florida Health Hospital after going into labor. She's also a professional doula. So she informed the medical staff of her birth plan. She wanted to try for a natural birth. However, doctors expressed concern about the risk of her uterine rupture and said that she should give birth via C-section. A uterine rupture basically like it's a life-threatening emergency because the uterine wall would tear open and then cause severe bleeding and abdominal pain and fetal distress, etc. It's rare, but it could happen. And so while she had 3 other C-sections, like, that was a concern because she'd already had 3, and it's more likely to happen when you've had C-sections before. But she's a doula, and she's trying to give birth in the way that she wants to give birth because this is her birth story, right? This is what she wanted
Hmm.
to do. So, they got her on a Zoom call in active labor, to talk about her needing to do a C-section.
The video is crazy.
Wild.
When you first see it, it's like, oh, this is a skit. This is a weird skit. But like what? And then to find out that it was real. And I'm so glad that she at least had the language to defend herself and to
Yes.
say like, do you realize what you're doing? I'm in labor. The stress that you're putting me under is putting me in harm's way. Do you see what's happening? Like, I'm so glad that she was able to do that, but she was still on the Zoom. She was still powerless. And it's just like, what is it with, what is it with Black women not experiencing healthcare in any way, shape, or form? Like research not being done to accommodate the Black women that need the help with XYZ the third. Like the fact that Henrietta Lacks went to the doctor in the first place because of or because of vaginal bleeding, and then cervical cancer is ultimately what they said um, ended her life. But why wasn't anyone just caring properly for people? You know what I mean? Why is this lady on Zoom? Why is Adriana Smith dead giving birth? Like, what is it? And I mean, know that the answer is racism and sexism and
Right.
misogynoir and all of it mixed together, but like, it still doesn't make sense to me.
No. Evidently, you're more beneficial to support and advocate for as a Black woman in this country when you're dead and they can use your body or your cells for research for other people and not have figured out a way to help you prior to your passing.
It's horrifying. I
Yeah.
guess, but before we go, since you are a Black woman, have you experienced this kind of discrimination bedside?
Yeah, yeah, actually, I'm pretty sure I did share this on a podcast episode for Real Relatable. I had Dr. Karen Ashby on, who's an OBGYN out in Cleveland. I grew up playing tennis with her basically. And so I had her on for April, which is Black Maternal Health Month. So shout out to
Or
Karen, shout out to Black Maternal Health Month. And just talking about the disparities of the like Black healthcare, and then there's maternal health care, and how the US has 3 times the maternal mortality rate than the rest of the world. And then when you add in being a Black woman, it's 3 times that. I'm pretty sure those are the numbers. There are threes in there for sure, and it's just certainly higher for Black women. And somebody is going to correct me or whatever, but I'll post it somewhere if I can find
great,
it. I'll
please
put the stat on the
engage.
screen.
Yes, great. Please correct her. Engage.
Yes, right?
We like that.
Put it in the comments. And so
Henrietta
I
Lacks was 15 years old. We're gonna do an all fake facts thing just for
right, just to
engagement.
see if anybody's actually listening. And so when I went into the hospital, I went to get induced about a week after I was due because I wasn't progressing. My cervix wasn't opening, da da da. And so then the next morning, like they put in this Foley balloon, which is supposed to like open your cervix, and it's filled with water basically. And so it opens, it's supposed to help open your cervix. And then by the time you come back, or I know someone who didn't get sent home. So like that kind of has me questioning because I was in awful shape when my cervix was trying to open. Anyway, so I go back to the hospital the next day, and that morning they start me with Pitocin. And Pitocin is basically this drug to like induce labor. It's something that your body, I believe, makes normally, but it was a synthetic version to help induce labor. So I've got this Foley balloon in me, and I've got Pitocin going. My doctor is giving me a cervical exam just to see if I'm dilating. And so I went from like 0 to maybe like a 1. And for a frame of reference, to deliver a baby, you need to be at a 10. I was
Right.
getting nowhere, right? So then the hours and hours go by. I'm still on Pitocin. They're giving me like the max legal dose that you can give, and I'm not really progressing. Like maybe I got to a 2. And so at that juncture, they were like, okay, well, we could try and, pop your balloon. We can break your water. We can, do this, that. Like I'm bouncing on this ball. I'm doing like it just the things. And so at that point, I'm like, I'm not dilating. That means he's not coming out, but we can't go back because we've already started. But my concern was turning what was going to be tried to be a natural birth like a vaginal birth, I should say, into an emergency C-section. And that's what I was
Mm.
really concerned about. So I opted to just do a C-section because I also didn't want to end up putting the baby at risk or putting myself at risk going into like a high intensity chaotic situation, and it had already been over 24 hours at this point of induction and I wasn't getting anywhere, like nowhere notable. So we go to do the C-section. I get a spinal, like that's how they numb the bottom half of your body, etc. And after the baby's delivered, we get rolled up to the maternity ward or whatever so I can, recover and everything. And mind you, like having a C-section, it is a massive abdominal surgery. Like they are cutting through, I believe it's 7 layers of skin, fat, muscle, da 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 da. Like it goes deep. And then obviously to get to your uterus to get the baby out. And so I remember when we got rolled up to the maternity area for our recovery room, and the nurses were like, okay, like move yourself over to the bed. And I'm like, I can't move myself. So even if you like, you're sitting here, right? Try and turn your torso, but imagine having 7 layers of skin and
No,
muscle and fat that, right. You can't do
no.
that. Like you need your abdominal muscles and your like all the whole stomach area for a lot of things, posture being part of it, right? And I couldn't do that. And so I was like, why would they try and get me to move myself? Like it just didn't make sense to me. And so then it seemed like it was an issue that they had to like get people to help move me. And I'm like, but who could feasibly move themselves after this kind of procedure, especially it being like your first one too. So they're like that kind of rubbed me wrong. And then the we had this like debacle of getting like Gray ended up being in the going to the NICU for a bit because they were giving me these narcotics. They gave me, I believe it was, gosh, what was it? I can't remember what the narcotic was, but they were giving me narcotics for pain. And they would come in giving me like two, And so for the first maybe day, I was taking two, but I asked them, I was like, hey, like, I'm breastfeeding my baby. Like, does this get into my breast milk? And they're like, oh, no, like, it's fine. If anything, it's very, very minimal. Like, there's no effect to the baby, da da da. And so I'm like, okay, okay. So while they do like examinations and things like that on me, they also check on the baby to get his heart rate and his oxygen levels and all that. And his oxygen levels were like low 90s, high 80s, when they're supposed to be high 90s. And that turned into this whole ordeal of getting like an EKG on his heart. Like they're not sure if his heart's working well enough. And they're like doing all these tests and stuff like that. And so my husband and I at the time were just like, what's happening? So, but he had worked at, and he works in healthcare still, but he had worked at the Texas Scottish Rite Hospital for Children when we lived in Texas. And so he was texting the doctors there because I mean, they saw plenty of sick children, unfortunately, but he's texting the pediatricians there to say, hey, like my son was just born. This is his oxygen level. Like this is what's happening. Da 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 da. And so anyway, we end up going down to the NICU and I was asking them again, I'm like, you guys, like, is it because of the narcotics that they're giving me for pain? And the NICU doctors, when we like finally get to see them, they're like, it's probably because you're on narcotics. And I'm like, huh, you
What do
think?
you know?
Yeah, like, duh, like that makes sense to me. But like at the time, I'm like, okay, these are medical professionals telling me like there's no effect. But like I'm glad that I asked. I'm glad that I
Yeah.
inquired. And then also I'm glad like after the first day, I would take like maybe one when they would come back like every 4 hours, 4 or 6 hours or whatever it was instead of the two. Cause they're like, are you sure you don't want two? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Just, one's fine. And they're like, well, I can fix, a pain level of, 5, but I can't fix a pain level of like 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever. And I'm like, I'm good. Just give me the one. And so again, I don't know if it's a racial thing. I don't know if it was maybe I'm an anomaly in terms of like maybe most women, it doesn't actually affect their baby. I don't know. But whatever the case may be, it did. And it was like they weren't listening to us. And that was really
Mm,
disappointing. But we learned that that was affecting Gray, obviously through my breast milk. And I couldn't feed him for that time. So I'm like pumping milk, but I'm not giving it to Gray because we need to figure out if his oxygen levels could like restabilize, which they did, understandably so. But then by the time like we were done with the NICU and everything, I was taking much less of the narcotic, and then I would take like maybe half of one, or uh maybe I would skip one of the times or stuff like that. Not putting myself in pain, it just I wasn't feeling that much pain to where I needed to take two.
mm,
And I will say the amount that my doctor prescribed me of this pill, like to go home with, was asinine. I'm like,
mm,
this is how you guys get people hooked on
mm-hmm,
drugs. Like, thank
mm-hmm.
goodness I don't have that trait, like it didn't resonate
Yeah,
with me in that way. Like, ooh, I gotta, like, it wasn't like that. Generally, I was taking it for pain. But there are
yeah.
people who would likely go home and abuse this. They gave me like a 30 or a 60-day supply or whatever it was. And I'm like, yo, like I need this for maybe another week. Like 2 weeks would probably have been plenty. But I'm like, this is
Mm,
just, it just felt like a, a push maybe to get someone in that direction.
mm.
I don't know for
I
sure.
get, I
That's
mean,
my
why not?
assumption.
Why not suspect that? Why not? I mean, on one hand, I'm like, oh, they actually gave a black woman pain meds. Interesting. You know what I
Right.
mean? But then I'm also thinking it's got to be tough with that amount of medicine and also bringing in postpartum.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like this could go really wrong for
Yeah.
the wrong person, the wrong combo. I don't even know. That's crazy.
Yeah, but all is well now, and when I
Yeah,
have more babies
yeah,
later, like, I will probably hire a doula and or a midwife, and I want to have, like, that community around me a bit more and, like, those advocates. Not that my ex-husband or husband at the time wasn't, like, a good advocate, it was his first time too, So
right. And how are you supposed to know? You're scared. You just had a
right.
baby.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but, yeah,
Ooh,
that's my birth story in a nutshell.
dang. Well, I'm glad that it was all successful
Yeah,
because I know that they're not always that way.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, ooh, it's tough. Also, sidebar, when you mentioned Pitocin and the cervix needs to be 10 centimeters dilated, um, I had recently practiced this information because I have a birth mod on my Sims 4 game. So we do the whole thing. Yeah, we see our obstetrician a couple times.
Oh
Yeah,
my
it's a whole
gosh.
thing.
Well, thank you for sharing your pregnancy
Mhm.
journey with us.
Yeah, as an ally, I like to be
Yes.
in it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love you.
Well, what an episode. I think
What
I
an
think this
episode.
is it. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next month.
We'll see you next month.